Hi everybody, welcome to the Paranormal Connection. I'm your host, Danna Wilberg. My guest today is a scholar, writer, teacher, and professional tarot consultant with more than 40 years experience. She is the founder of Tools and Rites of Transformation, a member of many international tarot organizations. She's a featured speaker at tarot conferences and symposiums around the world. Welcome, Mary Greer.
Well, thank you for having me here.
Boy, that's quite the title. You've done it all.
It's been a long time that this has been the center focus of what I do.
Wow. Well, why don't you start by talking about the history of tarot?
Oh, well, it's quite a bit different than what most people think, because there's, in some of the old books, they talk about it coming from Egypt or the gypsies, and the truth is pretty far from that. The cards appeared first, the tarot in specific, in between 1420 and 1440 in Milan or Ferrara. We're not exactly sure which city-state in northern Italy. Mm-hmm. And for the first 50 years or more, there were a lot of variations, a few of which continued on. So with more cards, less cards, different orderings of the cards. And they finally kind of settled in. The French occupied Milan at the end of the 1400s, early 15th century, and they took the cards back to France and developed what's called the Marseille deck. And at that point, they really solidified into the deck that we know today, or at least the Marseille version. Mm-hmm. And then they weren't used for fortune telling until officially until the end of the 18th century. So
what
1780s.
Did they use it for?
Playing card games.
Okay.
A game called tarocchi, which is also one of the words used in Italy for the cards. But the tarocchi game is the forerunner of bridge and whist.
Okay.
So what had happened was that regular playing cards were known in Europe from around 1350. The first mention is actually 1375. And that was a four-suited set of cards that probably came from possibly Egypt, but the Mameluke Muslim culture, mm-hmm. where there weren't any images on the cards other than flowers and leaves and symbols like polo sticks, which Europeans had no idea what those were. Polo wasn't played. So those came into Europe, and then people started playing games, trick-taking games, where they would come up with a trump suit. So just like you bid on that in bridge. Mm-hmm. Somebody in northern Italy came up with the idea, why don't we have a permanent trump suit, a fifth suit that's always trumps all the other suits. And we'll put these allegorical pictures with them. So we have justice and temperance and strength, which are the classical virtues. And then they added an emperor and an empress, a pope and a popess.
Oh, wow.
Which is, for the time, a very Catholic country.
Yeah.
It was a little bit strange, and people have wondered about that ever since. But that developed and really solidified into a game that's still played as a game in France and Italy today.
Well, I was at the Duomo. That's quite spectacular, and they're so traditional with everything there. So but I didn't see any of the tarot decks had I known.
Actually, you can go to any tobacconist shop in Italy and buy tarot decks.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it's a national treasure.
Okay. Doesn't that kind of go against the whole Catholic religion?
Actually, that's something that was added on later by people who looked at cards like the Devil card and probably the Hangman and said, these are scary and these must be something that, the devil's being lauded here. I mean, they made up stories about it that were frightening to them, but those are actually all figures that are very much part of the Christian imagery. You'll find those same images throughout northern Italy from that same period as part of the culture, and specifically Catholic culture. So that was something that people came up with later and had probably a little more to do with the idea of prediction, because a Christian concept is that only God can know the future.
Yeah.
Of course, that doesn't stop a lot of Christians today from, declaring that they've had special messages about what's going to happen. Yeah. So, where you get your prediction is kind of questionable.
Well, they all know if you don't change your ways, you're going down there, right?
Yeah, that's and then with the cards, you have a chance to
Yeah.
change your ways.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get started with the tarot?
It was a long time ago. I was in college, and my best friend got one of the tarot books by Eden Gray for Christmas. And I went over to her house to look at all her goodies, and there was this fascinating book, and I found myself very unusually being absolutely jealous. I wanted that book. She didn't get any cards with it, though, but I was drawn to the imagery and the pictures, partly because I was an English major and we had just been doing a section on archetypal criticism. So the criticism that really focused not only on symbols, but on the idea that they're cross-cultural. They can be found in all ages and all times. And I looked at the cards and I go, these are the primary images and symbols that do appear over and over again in almost every culture.
So did you go out, buy a deck, and start?
My first spiritual quest, I borrowed a car that was practically falling apart. Somebody had told me about a strange bookstore on the other side of town, so I went to my first metaphysical bookstore in Tampa, Florida, which they had an old spiritualist community and a fabulous metaphysical bookstore for the 60s. And I bought my first deck and bought my friend a deck too. And within that first year, I had decided that someday I was going to teach it in college as an academic subject. So I had to get not only my bachelor's, but my master's at least. And then also that I would someday write a book on it. The idea was, in my 60s or so, I would finally write my life's experiences with the cards and the wisdom. But I married a man who had written quite a few travel books and had a lot of friends that were writers. And so much earlier than that, he encouraged me to write.
You've got how many books?
I think it's 11 now.
11.
Yeah.
You don't just write 11 books overnight.
I take a long time to write a book.
So
Yeah.
you've been writing for quite some time. So you started way before you're predicted.
I started writing my first book in around 1980, about the same time my daughter was born.
Oh, wow.
So they kind of grew up together. That was Tarot for Yourself, which actually became a classic.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the first book that talked about reading tarot for yourself, because all the books before that either said, don't ever read the cards for yourself, or they'd say you can read them for yourself kind of as a one-liner and then never anything about it, but it's problematic, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
So when I talked to a lot of readers and asked them, do you ever read for yourself? All of them kind of admitted, oh, yes, I do read for myself. How else do you learn? And so I realized that was the perfect topic for a book, to look at the taboo and explore not only that major taboo, but a lot of the other taboos in tarot, and break them open, see if there were real situations behind them or not.
So how many different ways can the tarot be read?
It depends on the reader themselves, but basically you can do a purely descriptive reading, which is who you are, what's going on in your life right now, maybe some things about your past, but it's just purely descriptive and it's up to the person to make any sense out of it. Or it can be a predictive reading where you're focusing on something that's coming up. Will I get the job? I don't like doing readings like that, but that's a question that many people ask. It can also be kind of a teaching kind of situation, because the cards have been associated with magical organizations and the whole Western magical tradition, or what's known as the perennial philosophy or secret tradition. So because the cards have been associated with those, you can do a reading that really looks at how those philosophical ideas are working out in your life. And you can do advice readings. What should I do about such and such?
So when you start reading, do you start incorporating more and more of the different methods as you go along, or do you kind of pick a method that you're comfortable with and kind of stay with that? How does that work for you?
Well, for me, it's been so many years that I've tried to explore as many different approaches
Yeah.
as I can. So when I meet somebody who reads differently than I do, I try to learn something from them. Because we get stuck, and I probably wouldn't be in tarot as long as I've been in it if I had just started and read one
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
For me, it's exciting to break through my limits and see where I can go in an area that I haven't been able to develop. So I think it's really worthwhile to constantly be learning new things and stretching yourself.
Yeah.
And tarot's a wonderful way to do that, to learn to stretch yourself and perceive things in different ways. It's a good training for psychic development and to develop your intuition, which is different than
Yeah.
the psychic.
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because I've seen so many different cards. Some have symbols on them. Some have, they're just the figures. My grandmother, I told you, before we went on the show, she read just playing cards.
Yeah.
Which is it cartomancy?
Yeah, that's the general term. Actually, cartomancy can refer to any kind of readings with cards, but most specifically, it delineates regular playing cards.
Yeah. But I just was fascinated with that because, of course, what she read ended up coming true.
Yeah.
And the only person I've ever really had a reading with was Joseph Ernest Martin. He came on the show and did a small little reading. So that's something that I really haven't had a lot of experience with. But what I do notice is that there's a lot of things that you need to know. How many cards in a deck?
78 cards in a tarot deck.
Okay, so that's 78 symbols that you have to know.
There's other ways to do it. Some people relate to the cards what I call oracularly. That means they get messages directly. They sometimes talk to them. There's also psychics who use them merely as a focus. So they may lay out the cards and then simply talk to you and occasionally glance down at the cards and get kind of a hit that they can then kind of riff on, or it triggers something in their own mind. And then there's a way where when you're looking at the cards, you're really going into all the symbols in the cards.
Yes.
I do readings that I call interactive, which means that I'm guiding you in part through the reading to see your own insights, get your own insights. And I have certain ways that break down our normal expectations of what the cards might mean in order to get a fresh experience for you. It's a form of psychological projection, but I'm also keeping in the back of my mind and checking that against a whole system of magical correspondences that I've learned. Not everybody works with those.
Yes.
But it helps me to see the underlying patterns that are forming among the cards that you may not be aware of as you simply describe them.
So, being that you have been an instructor and
Reader
and everything else for so many years, do you see readers out there that just make you cringe?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I think everybody in any field, you can look at the people and really admire the ones who have studied, developed discipline, and become really good at what they're doing. And then there's the people who get in and do things haphazardly.
Yeah.
And it's the same in any field.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a little dangerous, though, when you're, to be giving people advice. Because a lot of people really cling to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And they take it to heart. And then I know my daughter had a reading, and it was, she had her palm read. And because of that, she broke up with her boyfriend. And, she just changed her life. And I said, well, maybe you should go have a read. She said, no, because I'm afraid, because I really believe what they're telling me.
Yeah.
And if they're not accurate, that's not good.
Yeah, and I've had quite a few people come to me for readings where they sit down and say, I'm really scared to do this because I had this reading that, something awful and so on.
Yeah.
So there's been plenty of situations where I've done what I call damage control on those kinds of situations, because there's, think of people who go to doctors and get bad diagnoses.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, tarot's not any different than any of the others, or you go to a financial advisor.
Yeah.
So any advisor is going to slip up. Even if they're really good, there are going to be times when they slip up. And people who say, well, you know, I'm 85% accurate or 90%, none of them that I've ever met have actually done any testing of this. This is just the personal feeling of it. But what about, even if it's 90%, what about the 10% where they're not accurate? And there's a question, you know, are the cards always accurate? But as faulty human beings, we sometimes misinterpret them. Definitely yes, but I'm not absolutely sure that the cards are always accurate, or else I would be absolutely wealthy from being able to predict the lottery.
There you go.
Yeah, so that to me is not the best use of the cards.
Yeah.
That's why I do a lot of interactive readings, because I would much rather, even if I'm wrong, have you correct me from something that you see in the cards and have an aha experience.
Yeah.
To me, a successful reading is when you have a transformational aha moment and suddenly everything comes together for you. I can hand it to you on a silver platter and it's not going to make the same kind of difference in your life is when you actually have that realization. And if you see it, I'll sometimes even be deliberately wrong in order, if I feel it's a space where you can correct me and you're ready to do that. Because that kind of pride in, no, it's not that, it's this. And then the person hears themselves and goes, oh, it's that.
Oh, I get that.
Yeah.
I really get that. That's interesting. So what do you feel the Tarot does best?
Oh, it does so many things that it's hard to say. It's fabulous for meditation. It's great for that kind of philosophical study, which I love. And you can actually look at a whole history of Western civilization from the early Renaissance on through the tarot. But in a reading, it's probably the personal insight, where you get to see your situation in a new light. You can perceive the options and ones that you hadn't considered before, or they kind of fall into place so you see which options are more viable than others. You can get clarity about your goals in a situation and realize, even if it's something you already knew, that this is the important piece. This is what you really need to be paying attention to.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
How often should a person have a reading?
You can do daily readings, especially when you're learning for yourself. And those have certain parameters around them. You know, 3-card readings, you're just observing how it actually manifests during the day. Occasionally you'll get a hit, oh, I need to be careful about something, and follow that up. But daily readings are mostly observational. And if somebody's coming to me, because I like doing in-depth readings, an hour and a half, I prefer that they come just once a year unless something really major shifts and changes. But I don't like having people come more than every 6 months at the most. Partly because the kind of readings I do border on the therapeutic, and I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist. And so I don't want to get into a situation where we're going deeply into those things, which the kind of readings I do would tend towards that.
Yeah.
If I have to create strict boundaries on it.
No, that's, that brings up another point, because you as a reader, as a facilitator for this kind of thing, you almost have to be very careful about the people that you're reading for. How does that work for you? Do you kind of talk with people and kind of get an idea of where their head is before you even begin, or do you just kind of take it on good faith that they're coming to you and that the information that you're going to impart is not going to, make them go off the deep end or anything like that?
Well, that's one reason why I don't do a lot of imparting. I will give them my opinion of what's going on in the cards towards the end, or in specific things along the way. But that's why I guide them through their own process. Also, because people tend to want some kind of definitive answer or advice, I came up with a technique that I use at the end of readings, where I take the person through picking out the cards that they see as the greatest problem, naming what those are, finding cards from the spread that show them breaking through that, and I have them pick the cards. I just become a scribe, and then the card that represents the qualities they most want to develop out of this situation. And it's kind of like they end up with an affirmation from the cards that's like taking 2 aspirin. It's like, take this affirmation, say it several times, morning, noon, night, and notice where in your life you're living in accord with that and where you're not. Don't give any energy to the negative, to where it's not working. Do give energy and focus on the places where it is.
That's
working.
very interesting. Can you believe we're almost out of time?
I know, quickly.
It's so quickly. Okay, so can you please give your information so everybody knows how to get in touch with you?
The best way is through my blog, my tarot blog, and that's marygreer.wordpress.com. Or you can just Google it with Greer Tarot Blog, and it's usually right at the top.
Okay.
So you can contact me through that also.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's give some information about the Paranormal Connection.
The Paranormal Connection airs the first and third Thursday at 9:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Our companion show, Story Connection, airs the second and fourth Thursdays of each month. Each episode repeats the following Friday at 1:30 p.m. and Saturday at 5:30 a.m. Watch these programs online at the same air times by going to accesssacramento.org and clicking Watch 17. In the Sacramento region, you can see us on Comcast Channel 17 and on AT&T Channel 99. You can find previously aired shows on the Paranormal Connection YouTube channel. For information on upcoming shows and previous Paranormal Connection guests, go to paranormalconnectiontv.blogspot.com. You can contact us at paranormalconnectiontv@gmail.com. And don't forget, find us on Facebook, become a friend, and become a fan.
Mary, we're going to be doing another part, a part 2, because you still have so much more information to share with our audience. But before we wrap up this episode, let's talk about your books, all these beautiful books that you've written. You want to kind of talk about each one?
Well, I mentioned Tarot for Yourself, a workbook for personal transformation, which was the first book.
Okay.
And kind of broke the through the taboos about reading for yourself. Who Are You in the Tarot is the, it was actually the second book I wrote called Tarot Constellations. It's a numerological approach to finding cards that are particular to you based on your birthday, both for your lifetime and for what are called year cards, every year, a lesson to be learned. 21 ways to read a tarot card. This one is 21 different approaches to reading the cards. And hopefully in going through all these, not only are you learning different ways that might really work for you, but also out of the 21 ways, you find out which ones you really feel most comfortable with, and that kind of defines your style of reading.
Okay.
So I've got directions at the end for being able to name what it is that you do, which I think is real important.
Yeah.
Tarot reversals. Not everybody reads reversed tarot cards. So with tarot reversals, I look at, I believe about a dozen different ways of reading upside down cards. And then the tarot court, there's 16 cards that in a regular playing card deck, there's only 12 of them, the king, queen, and page. In the tarot, there's a knight and a page. So people sometimes have a difficult time understanding how to work with those cards. Are they people? Are they something else? So that goes into a lot of depth, and also has a chapter on if you're creating your own deck, which a lot of people are doing now. How do you express in a modern context those court cards? We no longer have courts, so what do you do with them? And then Women of the Golden Dawn is, there's references to tarot because this is a scholarly biography of 4 women who belong to the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. that was in the late 19th and early 20th century. And they're known because the most popular tarot decks of the 20th century came out of that organization.
Oh, that's
Aleister
fascinating.
Crowley and Frida Harris's Thoth deck and the Rider-Waite-Smith deck.
Wow.
Yeah, and actually a couple of other decks that aren't as well known came out of that group. And so these are 4 women that really helped mold the Golden Dawn and their rituals.
Wow. Well, Mary, thank you so much for your expertise. You're phenomenal. And I want everybody to know that Mary is going to be sharing more of her expertise in our next episode. So please, come back and join us because she's got so much more information to impart. And I want to thank my absolutely awesome crew who volunteer their time each time we do this tapings. They come out and just give and give and give. Lorene and Rick and David and Tony and Eric, I really appreciate you guys. You're the best. And please, like I said, look for us next time when we bring you part 2 with Mary Greer. And for that, we're going to say good night to everybody and God bless.